there's going to be incidents of gun violence where people are attacking other people because they're assuming that they're armed. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
That's just bag of hammers stupid. So
bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
welcome, Armed Lutherans, Christian gun owners, and gun enthusiasts of all political and religious stripes. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competition, and the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. This is episode 87, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. CooksHolsters.com. Well, thank you for making Armed Lutheran Radio part of your day again this week, and for those of you new to the show, welcome aboard. We're happy to have you with us as well. Not much shooting info to report here at the beginning of the show as a result of an absolutely crazy week. I do have coming up, my church shooting club is getting together again on Sunday, which I'm really looking forward to that. My pastor even went out this week and took his license to carry class, so he is officially, well, not officially yet, but soon to be an actual pistol packing pastor, which is really pretty cool. And he even ordered himself a Cook's holster for his first concealed carry gun. Sam Williams of Team Armed Lutheran Radio, by the way, finished 5th in CDP sharpshooter at the Masters IDPA Championship in Alabama last week. Congratulations to him on that. Sergeant Bill and Mrs. Sergeant Bill are both practicing for the IDPA National Championship, which is just 2 weeks away in Crescent, Texas at the Triple C range. I'm not going to be able to shoot, as I mentioned last week, not going to be able to shoot nationals this year. I'll be at the Gun Rights Policy Conference that weekend. My next match is going to be the Lone Star Championship on October 14th. And then the Fall Brawl in Arkansas the week after that. Then I think my 2017 season is done. I'm thinking we'll probably close the season out with another Shooters Roundtable at the end of the season. Like we did last year, we did a couple of those, and those were fun. We'll probably look at scheduling another one of those sometime in late October, early November. That would be fun. Speaking of roundtables, we haven't done one in a while, but you can hear all 4 of the ones we did last year as a member of the Reformation Gun Club. Episodes 44, 45, and 48 from last year were added to our collection of audio files for this month. The Reformation Gun Club is our members-only site with exclusive content, full-length interviews, and every segment from our contributors. So check it out today at gunclub.armedlutheran.us for just $15.17 per year. That in honor of the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, by the way. You'll get some Armed Lutheran swag, access to our private Facebook group where you can interact with other members and with members of the show cast, and you'll get access to all the exclusive content. So check that out today at gunclub.armedlutheran.us. As I mentioned last week, the combat and competition class that we're planning with Sergeant Bill and Aaron Israel, we're still working out the details on that, trying to get everything nailed down with the range. Once we get that finalized, I'll send that out in a newsletter to subscribers, and I'll tell you more in an upcoming podcast. With any luck, that class will be the 18th or the 19th of November, so stay tuned. We got more details of that coming soon. All right, I'm flying solo again this week in our Clinging to God and Guns segment. Pastor Bennett and I we simply could not get our schedules aligned. He had an insane week, which included slamming his car into an 8-point buck And my week was crazy, overwhelmed with clients flying in from out of state to attend training at my company's office here in Texas. All I can say is thank goodness for Monster energy drinks, because that was really the only way I could get through it. Mia Anstine has some info about the Shoot Like a Girl program she introduced us to, I think back in April after the NRA, or maybe early May after the NRA annual convention. They've got some new stuff going on, and she's sharing that information with us today. Sergeant Bill is answering another question this week, this one about why he shoots competitively, what benefit he gets from it. And Aaron Israel is chilling with the Chi-Coms. He's been traveling to China for business, drinking rice wine and climbing the Great Wall, and sharing safety tips with us for overseas travel. So stick around, all that's coming your way right here after this brief timeout. You're listening to Armed Lutheran Radio on the Self-Defense Radio Network. For the reloaders in the audience, have you ever ordered reloading supplies online? Well, if so, who do you call when you need help, or if you need something special? Will they give you a price that includes hazmat and shipping? Will they promise to beat their competitors' prices, including shipping? And when you call, do you talk to a customer service rep, or can you talk to the owner himself? Well, if you'd prefer a personal touch and great customer service, talk to my friend Jim Swindle at U.S. Reloading Supply. It's a family-owned business that focuses on helping shooters get all the components they need at the very best prices. They carry all the name brands. If you've got a special order or large quantities, ask them for a quote and they will help you find what you need at a great price. Use the promo code Lutheran2017 and save 10% off your order and get free shipping on orders over $50. Check them out online at usreloadingsupply.com or call them today, 941-451-7357. U.S. Reloading Supply. Tell them the Armed Lutheran sent you.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
Hey, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is Ballistic Minute. So the other day, somebody asked me why I shoot competition. And the short answer I gave them was, 'cause it's fun. But I've been thinking about it, and I thought I'd share that with you guys. So for me, it makes me better for my job, for work. It helps me protect myself, my coworkers, and the citizens of the city that I work in. It also makes me better for protecting my family, my wife and my kids. And also, in a bigger picture, makes me better to help protect society, my neighbors, the people of this country. If anything horrible were to happen, war came to our soil, I'm prepared and ready to go. More so than somebody that is just a gun collector. But one of the biggest things, like I said, is it's fun. You get to be outside. It's kind of an adrenaline thing. And for me, it's kind of a contest, me versus my friends, the guys that I shoot with, to see if I can beat them or if they can beat me and how they're doing, how I can do, against them. Just like any other sport, really. I like to shoot competitive shooting because it makes me a better, more confident and competent shooter for concealed carry, and it gives me that confidence to know that I can draw and shoot when I need to. I can do the things that I need to because I've already done them a bunch of times. Now, you also get to meet a lot of awesome people. Some of my best friends now are people that I've met in the last 4 or 5 years shooting competition. And most of the people you meet shooting matches, whether they're club matches or sanctioned matches out of state, they're good people. They're really good, awesome people. And the last thing is basically what I just said, traveling. I get to travel to go to other places to shoot matches and see other towns and meet other people and for classes, training, matches, whatever it may be. So I get to travel. So these are the things that make me shoot competitive shooting, and because I enjoy it, it makes me better, I get to travel, and I meet good people. So if you haven't done it yet, get out there and try some competition shooting, whether it be IDPA or USPSA, 3-gun, or Steel Challenge, or even just an outlaw match. Get out there and try it. You never know until you try it. It's a lot of fun. I'm Sergeant Bill. This is your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Silvia is a 15-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department and masterclass competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
As many of you know, you'll likely have to win 2 fights if you have to use your gun in self-defense. The first fight is the gunfight itself. The second is the fight to clear your good name through the legal system. Even if you do everything right, you can still be prosecuted, which can cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Armed Lutheran Radio is proud to partner with the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network, and while they can't completely take away that worry, they can give you the peace of mind knowing that you've got the financial and legal assistance you need to win this new fight. Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network can help. Go to my website, armedlutheranradio.us, look for the coupon code on the right-hand side in the sidebar, and sign up for Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network protection and save $25 off your first year of membership at armedcitizensnetwork.org. Join me, Pastor Bennett, Paul Lathrop, and thousands of American gun owners who trust Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. armedcitizensnetwork.org.
It's time for this week's self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense, here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to talk to you about some tips for traveling overseas. I'm about to do that myself for work. I'm going to be gone for about 8 days in a third world country, and there's some things that I'm thinking about, and I want to point you to a blog post that Greg Elliforts did on activeresponsetraining.net back in November 2016, and I want to give you some takeaways that were profound to me. There's 20 tips in this article, and obviously I can't get to all 20 of them, but I'm going to hit a couple of high points here and a couple of main takeaways that I'm taking with me on my trip. First off is don't have big, ornate, gaudy-looking luggage. That obviously makes it look like you have a whole bunch of stuff in your luggage that would be worth stealing. So if you have to check a bag, make sure that it's not one that looks ridiculous and makes you look like you're a rich person with rich people things in your bag, because that's an obvious thing that if I'm hanging out at the carousel, which thieves are known to do in third world countries, I'm going to target your bag. So make sure your bag is nonchalant, think gray man, think inconspicuous, and pack in that. If you can avoid it, don't have a check bag at all. Try to fly with just a carry-on. I'm going to make an attempt at doing that when I go overseas. We'll see how much I succeed. I've got some business clothes I got to pack, so it makes it a little bit difficult. But I'm going to see if I can pull off a carry-on and not have to check a bag at all. Because if you can avoid the baggage claim altogether, that's going to be your best bet. On that same line of thinking, don't walk around with a backpack when you're out in the public sphere in these foreign countries, because they have picked up on the fact that we like to carry a whole bunch of crap around with us in our backpack that they would like to steal. So if they see you walking with a backpack, these thugs in third world countries, you're likely to be targeted because of the things that are in your backpack. So the less stuff you can lug around with you, the better off you're going to be. The next thing, you're very vulnerable in between your place of business, which I'm going over there for business, so I'll use that as an example, the place where I'm going to go for officing and the place where I'm going to be at the hotel. In between those two places, I'm very vulnerable. And so when I get into a cab, it's going to be very important that I sit in the back seat. A lot of people want to sit up front, but if you get into a confrontation with somebody, if the cab driver ends up to be some kind of a scam and he's trying to kidnap you or take you someplace and have you withdraw your money out of the ATM or something like that, if you're sitting behind him and he tries to pull something, then you're going to be able to control him a lot better than if you're sitting in the seat right next to him. So always sit behind the cab driver if you can, and make it such that you're able to get in a position of dominance if you had to take control of that person because they were trying to kidnap you or something like that, which has been known to happen in third world countries, even in places like Cancun when you go on vacation. Pay attention to that. Know where you're going. Have a map, something more than your cell phone. Get a map to where it is that you're going, or where the location is, so that when you're going from point A to point B, they can't tell you to go try to take you the scenic route to go and mug you and take all your money. So know where you're going, know generally what you should be passing, what the landmarks are, do that research ahead of time, and have a plan of how you're going to get where you're going. Don't just trust the cab driver to take you the right route. Bring a doorstop with you. having a doorstop is something that I always do when I go on the road to different hotels, even in the United States, is especially going to be important overseas because a lot of times people will break into hotel rooms and try to steal things while you're in them. So if you have that extra doorstop and can put it there, then even if they make friends with the maintenance person or whatever and try to sneak into your room, they're going to have trouble doing that because you're going to have that doorstop in place. So have that doorstop because you're very vulnerable in foreign hotel rooms especially. And just generally pay attention to what's going on around you. That's the same for everywhere, but you got to have that heightened sense of awareness when you are overseas because it's a different culture and things like that. So don't stick out like a sore thumb. If you can have all the situational awareness in the world, and if you look like a tourist, then you're going to be targeted like a tourist. So look how the locals look, do what the locals do, try to dress how the locals generally dress. Don't walk over there with your American flag shirt and a camera draped around your neck and a Dallas Cowboys hat, just because it's going to make you a target, right? So try to look as nonchalant as possible and pay attention to what's going on around you. Don't be staring at your cell phone. Pay attention to what's going on. Those are some tips that I'll be carrying with me. Once again, you can find this article on activeresponsetraining.net. It's called 20 Rules for Travel Survival. I only got to a few of them, but check that out when you get a chance. That's your personal defense tip for the week. Thanks for tuning in.
Aaron Israel is a Personal Defense Network contributor and owner of Fundamental Defense. You can find out more and sign up for any of Aaron's classes at fundamentaldefense.com.
The percentage of women who own guns is growing. American women are more knowledgeable and better equipped to defend themselves than ever before. So, why is it that every time I go to a gun shop, I feel like they're talking down to me? Like, hey little lady, let me show you what you need. It's like all they want to do is sell me a pink gun. If you're tired of feeling that too, visit Guns for Gals, a specialty firearms boutique designed to empower women with information about firearm safety and to equip them with the means to protect themselves. The owners go out of their way to find products specifically for women, and they actually listen and ask questions to help you find the right products to meet your needs. If they wouldn't own it themselves, they won't sell it. Guns for Gals is located at 2035 Central Circle, Suite 108 in McKinney, Texas. Open Monday 1 to 6 and Tuesday through Thursday 11 to 7. And on weekends, you can find them at a gun show near you. Or shop online at www.gunsforgals.com. Guns for Gals. More than just a gun shop. It's how gun shopping should be.
Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstine.
Hi guys. Last spring I shared an interview with you of Christy Crawford, who is with Shoot Like a Girl, and I talked to you about their virtual shooting range, a trailer that they take around the country to various locations and events, and they happen to be at NRA, and I talked to you about what they are doing to empower women. So I've spent time helping them as an instructor. I've helped them sell their logo wear. And while I was at NRA, I was one of the select few that got to listen to a brand new anthem that they have finally released. They launched it this week, and it's called Shoot Like a Girl Anthem. And I wanted to share it with you because it really is a song that encompasses what this organization is doing. So Shoot Like a Girl is very excited to release their single, and it was written by Tanya Davis and Michael Curtis. And Tanya has seen success with her single Home Again. And she's been included on the Grand Ole Opry radio with her single Don't Be Cruel. She has been featured with Vince Gill. Shoot Like a Girl's anthem is being performed by Nashville star winner Angela Hacker, and it epitomizes the company's brand of empowering women. So with an upbeat classic country tone, the song is a blast to sing along with, and it declares, I am an outdoor lover, fight like a warrior, shoot like a girl. Through the song, Shoot Like a Girl accomplished their goal of giving women an anthem that exudes the confidence that comes from shooting sports and spreading messages that women can be proud of. So they tell us this is the right time for the Shoot Like a Girl anthem, and they say we need a song that all young girls and women can look for inspiration and to achieve their goals. And there are extremely empowering lines in the song that all women should be able to find strength in, says Karen Butler. And really, I enjoyed listening to the song. I think you guys might like to listen to the song as well. And it's something I hope you'll share with your friends. It really is cool. And hopefully we can make this song a hit in the shooting industry and see something new out there in the music world. I will have Lloyd share a link to the iTunes store where you can listen to the song and maybe download it and share with your friends. I hope you enjoy it. Talk to you guys next week. Bye.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstine.com.
A good holster is absolutely critical if you're going to carry a firearm for self-defense. If you need a quality holster, let me recommend Cook's Holsters. I've found Cook's Holsters when I bought an IWB holster to write a review. I liked that holster from Cook's Holsters so much that I applied to become an official Cook's Holsters dealer. Cook's Holsters are American-made, custom-molded to fit your firearm. The advantage of Kydex is that it holds its shape. It doesn't lose retention. It won't wear on the finish of your firearm the way leather will. They're available for hundreds of gun models, dozens of color combinations and different printed patterns. They're great for concealed carry, for range work. They come with a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Check them out today, www.cooksholsters.com. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST to save 10% off of your order, and make sure you've got a quality holster. Go to cooksholsters.com today.
Armed Lutheran Radio comes with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you are not completely satisfied, the next episode is free. Up next, we're clinging to God and Guns with Pastor John Bennett.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Time now for Clinging to God and Guns, where we analyze articles, videos, and interviews that use Scripture to support an argument in the gun rights debate. We're normally joined by our good friend, Pastor John Bennett from St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. Pastor Bennett we just couldn't get our schedules together this week. My week was crazy. His week was crazy. And so we just couldn't make it work out. So hopefully we'll have Pastor Bennett with us next week. I'm going to forage ahead with what we had planned for this week, which was a foray into the Grimpen mire that is Patheos.com. This post is written back in October 2015 as part of the forum that Patheos did related to the Armor of Light documentary released by the Reverend Rob Schenck and Abigail Disney. If you go back to episode 78, and you'll be able to hear more about that documentary, and Pastor Bennett and I sort of dissect one of Reverend Schenck's sermons related to the movie. This article, though, is a blog post not written by Shinky O'Toole, but it's by a Dr. Christopher Hayes, who is the D. Wilson Moore Associate Professor of Ancient Near Eastern Studies at Fuller Theological Seminary, or at least that's what he was when he wrote this article. He's also previously held teaching positions at Emory University, Princeton Theological Seminary, and the University of Notre Dame's Tantor Ecumenical Institute in Jerusalem. And this post is entitled, "The Earth is Filled with Violence Because of Them, Guns Seen Through the Lens of Genesis." So what you're going to hear here is Dr. Hayes is going to try, he's heard too many people using the Old Testament as justification for gun ownership and so forth. And so he's not happy with this. So he's going to try to make the argument here that the Old Testament's not just all hellfire and brimstone and violence, that there's lots of good old-fashioned conflict resolution that can be found in the Old Testament. One of the oldest and most basic theological claims the Bible makes about the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is that he is the Lord of life and death. This fundamental point resounds through much of the canon, from the cries of the Psalms to the threats and promises of prophets, and from the miracles of Jesus to the final revelation. In 2 Kings 5:7, the king of Israel despairs of his own powers, asking, "Am I God to give death or life?" Like many Americans, I've watched with increasing disbelief, dismay, even anger, as our country has failed to get a handle on its epidemic of gun violence and the harmful subculture that enables it. When you read the words gun violence and the harmful subculture that enables it, what comes to your mind? What comes to your mind when you hear those words? I mean, we think about drug abuse, we think about gangs, we think about home invasions and drive-by shootings, we think about inner-city crime, broken families, the subculture that devalues human life. That's the subculture that we think of. The harmful subculture that Dr. Hayes is talking about here is you and me. Gun culture, gun owners, people who own guns for self-defense, for home defense, NRA members. We are the subculture he's talking about. He's not talking about criminals. He's talking about gun owners like you and me. So back to the article. In that effort, the work of politicians and public health researchers is crucial, but there is a need for biblical scholars and theologians too, since the battle is for hearts and minds. And you can find websites arguing that the Prince of Peace would have high-fived you for your purchase of an AR-15. Now, he doesn't link to examples of this kind of thing, but we've all seen them, and we've seen the memes of, God or Jesus sitting and holding, instead of holding a staff, he's holding an AR-15, or Moses with the shotgun in his hand, the picture of Charlton Heston from the movie, but they've superimposed a rifle in his hand instead of the staff. He's right, you can find these things. Most of them are jokes. Some of them, I guess, are serious. If you go back where Pastor Bennett and I looked at a sermon by Pastor Stephen Anderson talking about how God wants you to have a weapon, notice that the battle for hearts and minds he's talking about, and keep this in mind as you hear this, the battle that he's wanting the biblical scholars and the theologians to engage in is one to change your minds to give up guns and support gun control. That's what he's arguing. Not to change the hearts and minds of people who are committing crimes, not to change the hearts and minds of the people who are committing violence with guns. No, it's to change the hearts and minds of the people who won't go along with gun control. These pro-gun theological arguments use the Old Testament extensively, and many readers bring a preconceived notion that the God of the Old Testament, quote-unquote, is violent, so they may be predisposed to believe that the Lord warrants gun violence. Is that correct? Okay, so again, he gives no examples of people making this argument that the Lord warrants gun violence. I'm not sure whether that's not an argument I've seen made much. I can't think of a specific example, and he doesn't give any. I don't know that I've ever heard it said this way, that the God of the Old Testament, which is, by the way, the God of the New Testament as well, that he is so violent, therefore it's okay for us to be violent. That's basically what that sentence is saying. I've never heard that argument. I think, and as you go through this, you're going to hear more of it. It sounds like he's stuck on the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth argument. It's the attitude that says shoot first and ask questions later. And we've talked about this as well. If you go back to episode 85, I think, where we were talking about the biblical perspective on self-defense and home defense, that's one area that I think he might be trying to address here, this idea that somebody comes on my property, I'm going to shoot them, that kind of stuff. It's the attitude and not the gun itself. Okay, so back to Dr. Hayes. Am I God to give death or life? The question is rhetorical, and it brings into focus a fundamental problem with the United States' gun obsession: hubris. Humankind wants and believes that it needs a power over life and death that our humanity makes us unworthy of. Now, see, there's the proof of what I mean. When he's talking about our gun obsession, he's complaining not about gun violence. It's not violent crime or the criminals he's complaining about. He's complaining about you and me, gun owners who oppose gun control. Because we don't agree with the left's prescribed solutions, then we are obsessed with our guns. So this is what he's talking about. This is that culture, that subculture that he's talking about. So back to Dr. Hayes again. Paul talks about an analogous denial of God in Romans 1. Quote, since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind and to things that should not be done, end quote. That's from Romans 1:28. One of those things is murder, and he references Romans 1:29. The theological tradition calls our condition sin, but even a secularist can agree that our human limitations render us unable to wield the power of death justly. Okay. I hate this argument. I absolutely despise this argument. I mentioned this last week. because we won't give up our gun rights. Remember the article we looked at from the Texas Baptists last week was that because we won't give up our guns, because we won't agree with gun control, then we must be worshiping our guns. This is the argument that because we won't go along with gun control, because we support gun rights, because we won't agree with our betters in government, we aren't acknowledging God. Let's look at Romans 1:28 and 29. Let's look at it in context, and let's see what is going on here. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore God gave them up to the lusts of their hearts, to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator. So what he's talking about here is people who are putting their trust in human beings, like government, like man-made laws, and not putting their trust in God. He's sitting here and he's making this argument that we, because we won't give up our guns and see the wisdom and the greatness of human gun control law, that we're not serving God. We're not acknowledging God. Here's a tip for those of you like Dr. Hayes. God and government are different, and not acknowledging the great wisdom of our government doesn't mean we're not acknowledging God. Government, though instituted for our good by God, is run by wicked human beings. Most of those in Congress, most of those in government, don't know their butt from a hole in the ground, and yet they're making laws about them. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. What do you think he's talking about there? And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another. Men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind, to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They were full of envy, murder, and that's the one word that he picks out. He gives you verse 28 and then verse 20, and then one word from verse 29, and ignores all the rest. They're gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. He's talking about people who have turned their back on God's word and God's law. But what Dr. Hayes is saying is that because we want to keep our guns to protect ourselves and our families, that we have turned our backs on God, that we are not acknowledging God, that we fall into this category that Paul is talking about in Romans, and that's BS. So see, if you take this out of context, you can twist this to mean whatever you want. You won't give up your guns, so you must not believe in God. You must be turning your back on God. No, read a little more and read it in context. As usual, as Pastor Bennett says, context is everything. And I absolutely, like I said, I hate this argument, and it should offend every Christian. If we're going to think about guns and the Bible, getting back to Dr. Hayes, where better to start than at the beginning, with the book of Genesis? Nowhere in the Bible is God's lordship over life and death more thoroughly and artfully portrayed. Genesis begins with the creation of every living thing. That's Genesis 1:28. The serpent in the garden pitches Eve and Adam the fruit of the forbidden tree with the promise that they could live forever. That from chapter 3, verse 22. One of Genesis's most pervasive references to life is easy to overlook. 33 times in the genealogies from Genesis chapter 5 and Genesis chapter 11, we read, "And X lived Y years." That phrase captures a central interest of the book. They lived. The chain of life is unbroken, except maybe for Cain. In God's efforts to shepherd humankind, the preservation of life becomes the central theme of the plot. Eventually, the story focuses on the preservation of Abraham's family. If the family line is snuffed out, then the promises to Noah in Genesis 9 and Abraham in Genesis 12 and 15 are broken. Irony alert here, the central theme of the plot of Genesis is the preservation of life. Well, we who own guns for self-defense and home defense do so to preserve life, our lives and the lives of our loved ones, right? So it's the same sort of thing. And we're talking about the chain not being broken, right? And that God shepherding humankind. Let's not forget that Genesis chapter 6, God snuffs out the entire planet, with the exception of the people in Noah's family who can fit on the boat. Let's not forget that. And let's not also forget what Abraham did in Genesis 14. Now, notice he mentions the promises to Abraham in Genesis 12 and 15, but in between 12 and 15, Abraham led 318 men to attack an army that had kidnapped Lot and his family. So, in order to preserve life, Abraham led a small detachment of highly trained, and it actually says, trained warriors to fight a battle and to kill to preserve his family. Let's not forget that. In Genesis, Dr. Hayes continues, we humans do not make it easy on God to make life flourish. We are a fountain of rebellion and unrest. And we continue to be, by the way. Adam and Eve pursue life through the wrong means. Cain murders Abel. Lamech avenges himself 77-fold. The generation of Noah propagates violence. The persecuted of Sodom and Gomorrah send up a great cry to heaven. The brothers of Joseph throw him into a pit and report him dead. And all this happened without a single gun, by the way. Let's not forget that. But I digress. Back to the article. At the end of the book, however, we learn from Joseph that human violence and rebellion do not have the last word. He tells his brothers, although you intend to harm me, God intended it for good in order to keep alive a numerous people, as he is doing today. This is from Genesis 50. Along the way, despite the manifest flaws of humanity, Genesis subtly expresses the hope that humans can resolve conflict without physical violence. They don't do that very often, but yes, there are examples. Examples include the parting of Abraham and Lot after their shepherds' inability to coexist, that in Genesis 13. And remember, it's after Lot has departed from Abraham in chapter 14 of Genesis that Lot gets kidnapped by a rampaging army, and Abraham rounds up 318 well-trained soldiers to go save him. The covenant of separation enacted by Jacob and Laban after their many conflicts in Genesis 31, and the meeting of Jacob and his brother Esau without bloodshed in Genesis 32, although the latter had threatened to kill the former for stealing his blessing and birthright. Again, note how he overlooks, like I mentioned, he is overlooking the violence that Abraham committed in defense of his family. The family stories of Genesis demonstrate that even within the messiness of human existence, there is hope. There are chaotic and challenging stories from which to extract ethics, but they are not without logic. Indeed, they are arguably the best possible outcome of the theological universe in which they are set. Consider this. The creation stories and primeval history leave no doubt that the whole earth is the Lord's, as Exodus 19:5 puts it. Humans are sinful. Every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. That from Genesis 6. More specifically, they are violent. The earth is filled with violence because of them. But God holds the power of life and death, and so he warns them, after the flood, for your own lifeblood I will surely require a reckoning. Whoever sheds the blood of a human, by a human shall that person's blood be shed. For in his own image God made humankind. Now this is the old eye for an eye thing, and as I recall, Jesus counseled against this in the Sermon on the Mount. And we talked about this back in episode 85, the idea that taking revenge when you are slighted, when you are wronged, even if someone comes to your house and they kill a member of your family, to take revenge on them is not Christian. But to defend yourself against them is wholly different. People inevitably come into conflict. That's who we are. And that's not going to change if you take away guns, by the way. Gun control isn't going to stop that. More people get killed, and I keep saying this every episode seems like, more people die from blows from hands and feet than with the dreaded AR-15 that he mentioned earlier. Mankind is wicked and sinful, and that's where the problem is. But I digress. I'll get to that in a moment. Dr. Hayes continues, but in our conflict, not all solutions are open to us. God is the keeper and shepherd of all. Those in his flock are his, not the property of men to be slaughtered. Yes, we're not the property of men to be slaughtered. So why should we lay down and allow evil men to slaughter us? Why should we give up a means of self-defense to the government so that pantywaists like Dr. Hayes can feel better about things, so he doesn't wring his hands about gun violence, He wants to disarm you and me and make us property of evil men to be slaughtered. And no, not all solutions are open to us. Pacifism is not a solution that's open when someone is trying to kill you or your family. Let's go back to that verse that he mentions here. For your own lifeblood I will surely require a reckoning. Whoever sheds the blood of a human, by a human shall that person's blood be shed. Let's not forget Christ's words in the Garden of Gethsemane that is often twisted as an argument for gun control. It's really not. He tells Peter to put away his sword. All who take the sword will die by the sword. The person that comes to my door and tries to break it down and harm my family, he has already taken the sword. So if he is killed trying to break into my house to harm me and my family, guess what? He's died by the sword. My gun ownership isn't harming anyone. I'm not going out and threatening anyone with my gun. The problem, again, as we've mentioned many times before, the problem is in the heart of the person who has the gun, not the gun itself. So taking guns away from people who are not threats, who are not criminals, who are not violent, who are not predisposed to committing sinful acts with that gun is not going to make people safer. Abraham, Lot, Jacob, Laban, and Esau honor this in their actions. In their limited human ways, they are models. They may not be saints, but they can manage not to kill each other. They master the sin that Cain could not. Except for that time when Abraham led 318 heavily armed men to attack an army and kill people in order to save members of his own family. It's true that these are, he's pointing out examples of forgiveness and conflict resolution in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is not just a book about violence, and mankind, since the fall, is wicked and evil and sinful. And yet, there are people who are examples of forgiveness. Back to Dr. Hayes. The story suggests that it wouldn't have been enough had Joseph's brothers killed him, whether directly or indirectly. Without Joseph's rise to power in Egypt and his foresight in preparing for famine, his brothers and their families presumably would have starved. Even the brothers perceive divine judgment in their precarious situation. As Reuben puts it, now there comes a reckoning for his blood. This is the very reckoning that God promised in Genesis 9. The use of the same Hebrew verb leaves no doubt. They are guilty, but the punishment does not come. God intended it for good. If one speaks of God intervening to break the cycle of sin and violence, Christians are prone to think of it as a New Testament phenomenon in the person of Jesus Christ. But here it is in the beginning in the person of Joseph. So Joseph, the story of Jacob and Esau, yes, there are examples of forgiveness. There are examples of people refusing to allow their wicked desire for revenge, for payback. They put those things aside and they forgive. And if the author's point is that the Old Testament is not just about hellfire and brimstone and an eye for an eye. It's also, there are examples, there are very good examples of forgiveness, of kindness and tolerance, of people not going down the path to violence. Where do we come into this story? Dr. Hayes writes, how do we live into this story? By buying guns and brandishing them at every threat? Or by seeking to wield the power of death over our neighbors? Or rather by partnering with God in breaking cycles of violence as Joseph did, and by facing even those who have done us harm without harming them back? All right, so he was making good points until this. His point about examples, there being excellent examples of forgiveness in the Old Testament. Yes, Joseph models Christ's forgiveness when he doesn't seek revenge on his brothers who treated him so poorly. But this is the same piebald stupidity that infects every one of these anti-gun Christians. The inability to distinguish between revenge, what he's talking about, Joseph didn't take revenge on his brothers, that's very different from self-defense. The inability to distinguish between law-abiding gun owners and criminals. The inability to distinguish between people who want to defend life, who want to protect their families, from the criminals who prey on the innocent. It's infuriating to me that this is the constant argument. There are two basic tenets to any Christian article or argument in favor of gun control. And it's a fundamental flaw in the understanding of human nature, but it's also I don't know where this comes from, and I don't know why they fall for this crap. Okay, there's two things. The first is the idea that the gun itself turns people wicked, that they would not do bad things if they didn't have a gun. Let's not forget that all the bad things that happen in the Bible, all the violence that's committed in the Bible, not a single gun. People commit violence because of sin. People hurt one another because of sin. Now, the second thing, this inability to distinguish between revenge and self-defense. And I don't know whether it's intentional or whether it's just a misunderstanding, because they're not gun owners and they don't understand the mindset of people who are interested in defending their own homes and their own lives. Maybe they just don't get the mindset. But the idea that if someone breaks into my house and I have to use a gun, I threaten to use a gun and they go away, or they won't go away and I end up having to shoot them, that somehow that's akin to going out and hunting down the guy who kicked in my door and shooting him at his house, or going to the courthouse and shooting and killing the guy who attacked me when he shows up for trial, or that self-defense is somehow no different than the violent, horrible crime that we see on the streets of Chicago, that drive-by shootings and people defending their homes against criminals, that there's no difference. That somebody who has a gun for home defense is no different from the thug on the street who's got a gun in his waistband and illegally carrying a gun around. That the people who go to a gun show to buy a gun for sport or self-defense or concealed carry are no different from the criminal who might go out and try to illegally purchase a gun. The inability to make that obvious distinction is frustrating. Back to our article. Some will object that it was easy for Joseph, Jacob, and Abraham to show grace to members of their own family. Surely within a family it's more necessary to avoid violence. But in the New Testament, all Christians are called children of Abraham by faith. He is the father of all of us. That from Romans 4:16. The ethics are the same. While the clan divisions pass away, this is where evangelical Christians often fail most spectacularly. Taken as a demographic, evangelicals are clannish in the extreme. But God intends to preserve life for all, not just one family. God intends for us all, minimally, to coexist without violence. Joseph and Jacob and Abraham didn't kill each other or members of their own families, so we should be nice to the rapists and the home invaders. What the heck is he talking about here? He's lost me. Finally, the universality of sin means that the binary opposition of good guys and bad guys is fiction. Sin means that the good guy with the gun is always susceptible to becoming the bad guy with the gun, as we see over and over again. I got to stop in the middle of this paragraph because this is just, the good guy with the gun cliche is overblown. I will give you that. There's no doubt the answer to every problem is not a gun. The answer to every self-defense situation is not a gun. It is a solution for a small subset of problems. But this argument that he's making here is straight up bovine excrement. The everyone is law-abiding until they're not argument. We can't own guns, we can't carry guns because we're all sinners. You're no different from the thug on the street. You Christian gun owner who has a gun to protect his family, you're no different from the crackhead in Chicago. And I'm sorry, I apologize to Chicago because I keep using Chicago as an example, but it's the one that jumps out in people's minds. Washington, D.C., you name it. That you, the law-abiding gun owner, you just haven't turned your life over to drug dealing and crime yet, I guess. We're all potential criminals. So why don't we just lock everybody up? Because at some point, why don't we just take away all of our rights, every last one of them? Because at some point, we're likely to turn into criminals. That's what the argument he's making here. So why don't we just, either if we're not going to lock everybody up, why don't we just take away everything that's sinful? Because we might turn to sin. We might do something harmful. We might do something illegal. So why don't we just take it all away? Swords, knives, baseball bats, pipes, candlesticks, porn, computers. A good guy with a knife is susceptible to becoming a bad guy with a knife. So why don't we take them all away? It's dumb. I'm sorry. This is just so freaking stupid that I cannot believe people write it, especially a guy who's a professor. I'm sorry. It just drives me crazy. Jesus says, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body to go into hell. That from Matthew 5:30. If he would say this of a hand, how much more does it apply to mere guns? They have to go. They have no place in the Christian family. Sin is lurking at the door, but we must master it. This is bullshit. If having that gun makes you want to go kill people, yeah, you probably shouldn't have the gun. The verse from Matthew 5 is basically, look, if some object tempts you to commit sin, then you need to get rid of that. That if those things tempt you to commit sin, you'd be better off to get rid of them, even if it's part of your body, rather than commit sin and end up in hell as a result, to lose your eternal salvation as a result of that sin. And I would agree, to an extent. I will agree, up until he says that it applies to guns, because this is that whole talisman of evil BS. I would agree. If you have a gun and you're tempted and you're prone to violence. I was reading some articles this week, and of course, the new approach to trying to convince people to support gun control is this idea that the precursor or the best indicator of violence is not necessarily, politics or religion. It's your history of violent behavior, your history of abuse of other people and of spouses, and that's exactly right. If having a gun makes you want to kill people, yes, you should by all means not have guns. If having that gun in your safe tempts you to use them to harm other people, if you have a gun because you desire to shoot the guy who breaks into your house or the guy who tries to rob you, you need to get rid of the gun, pure and simple. Because the problem isn't the gun, the problem is your sin and your heart. My guns don't cause me to sin. I dare say 99+% of lawful gun owners are not tempted to use their guns in sinful ways simply because they own the guns. The sin that causes people to commit violence is still there even if there isn't a gun involved. It's not going to be stopped if the gun's not available. It doesn't suddenly make you a good, wholesome, sinless person to not have a gun. So then what do we ban next to prevent our sinful nature from causing other people harm if the guns are gone? Look at the United Kingdom. Now it's pointy knives. They have this campaign to try and convince people to throw their kitchen knives in the bin, the trash. It's insane. The fundamental problem is not the thing. It's not the knife or the gun or the baseball bat or the car or rope or golf clubs or pass-load nail guns.
I go to Home Depot, get a 16-penny nail gun with an air compressor. Pull the safety back on that thing with a claw hammer and keep you out of my yard for about 2.5 hours. No background check, no urine sample.
The problem is the sin in the heart of man. Getting rid of that gun is not going to change that. Since we all have the mark of Adam, since we are all fallen, this gets back to that, I was complaining about last week and back in episode, I guess it was 84, that argument that we're supposed to be transforming ourselves into the image of Christ. Well, we weren't born with the image of Christ. We never had it. We never will. We are born into the image of Adam, with the sin of the fall. If getting rid of guns, if getting rid of weapons would make us more spiritual and more holy and would make us less sinful, then why didn't Jesus counsel every person that he talked to get rid of their weapons? Why didn't he counsel the soldiers to stop soldiering? Why didn't he tell his disciples, no, those 2 swords, put them away, they're too many. And taking away the gun or telling people that they've got to give them up with gun control laws, trying to shame people into thinking that they're not good Christians because they don't support gun control, because they won't give up their rights blindly, it's shameful. And if you're like me, you're getting tired of hearing it. All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. I hope this has been helpful or useful. If you have any questions about what you heard here today, any thoughts or comments, please be sure to visit us at the feedback page at armedlutheran.us. Look for feedback in the menu at the top of the page, and be sure to send us a voice message or a voicemail, or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you and share your thoughts in a future episode. Be sure to tune in next week for another edition of Clinging to God and Guns, right here on Armed Lutheran Radio. And that's going to wrap it up for another week of Armed Lutheran Radio. Thank you all so much for listening, for downloading and subscribing, for for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week. Be sure to check out the Reformation Gun Club, where we have lots of exclusive content for members. That's at gunclub.armedlutheran.us. And thank you to my awesome cast of contributors, Aaron Israel, who is traveling in Asia, Sergeant Bill Silvia, of course. Thank you so much, Bill, for what you do every week. And Mia Anstine, thank you so much for your tips. Pastor John Bennett, Lord willing, will be back with us next week, and I really appreciate everything he does, and I know his schedule has been kind of hectic the last couple of weeks. We sure miss having him here on the show, but know hopefully we'll be able to get together again next week. And again, thank you for listening, downloading, and subscribing. Until next week, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.